What if buying dinner for strangers who called you terrorist could make you a millionaire in 24 hours? If you want to witness how one Muslim girl's kindness in the face of hatred became the investment that changed everything, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell. Because what happens next will restore your faith in humanity and karma's perfect timing. But let's go back to where it all began. The fluorescent lights of Danny's family diner cast harsh shadows across the cracked vinyl booths as 19-year-old Amira Hassan counted her last $5 for the third time. The wrinkled bills felt fragile between her fingers, all that remained after paying tuition, rent, and her mother's medication costs. Phoenix State University's pre-med program demanded everything she had, leaving her surviving on one meal every 2 days and the desperate hope that her academic scholarship would cover next semester's expenses. Her hijab, a soft blue that matched her tired eyes, drew the usual stares from other late-night diners. After 3 years in Phoenix, Amira had learned to distinguish between curious glances and hostile surveillance. Tonight's crowd leaned heavily toward the latter category: truck drivers, night shift workers, and insomniacs who seemed to view her presence as a personal affront to their version of American dining. "While it be, honey?" Dolores, the 60-something waitress, approached with the weary kindness of someone who'd seen every kind of struggle. Her coffee-stained apron and genuinely warm smile made her the only reason Amira felt safe eating here during these vulnerable late hours when prejudice felt more dangerous than hunger. "Just the soup and bread special, please," Amira replied softly, sliding her $5 across the Formica table. The meal would have to last her until Thursday when her campus job paid again. 2 more days of careful rationing, library vending machine crackers, and the free coffee her study group shared during endless chemistry sessions. At the booth directly behind her, an elderly couple studied their menus with the deliberate concentration of people who had nowhere else to be. Eleanor Mitchell, 72 and elegant despite her worn coat, whispered to her husband Robert about prices that seemed to have doubled since their last visit months ago. Their expensive shoes and subtle jewelry suggested comfortable retirement, but their hushed conversation carried undertones of financial anxiety that Amira recognized intimately. "I can't believe we forgot our wallets again," Eleanor murmured, loud enough for nearby tables to overhear. "Robert, we've been coming here for 20 years. Dolores knows us. Surely she'd let us pay tomorrow." But her voice carried the uncertainty of people whose pride had been wounded by circumstances beyond their control. Robert Mitchell, 75 and distinguished in a way that suggested a lifetime of business success, patted his wife's hand reassuringly. "We'll figure something out, dear. We always do." But his eyes swept the diner with the calculating assessment of someone accustomed to reading people and situations with professional precision. The conversation at the counter turned ugly with the casual cruelty that late-night diners seem to specialize in. "Look at that," a truck driver named Jake muttered, gesturing toward Amira with his coffee cup. "She's been sitting there for 20 minutes, probably planning something. You can't trust people like that in places like this." His companion, a security guard finishing his graveyard shift, nodded with the authority of someone who considered himself an expert on suspicious behavior. The headscarf, the way she keeps checking her phone, sitting alone at this hour. Classic signs. I've seen in my training videos. Dolores delivered Amira's soup with an apologetic smile, the portion slightly larger than what $5 typically bought. "Extra crackers tonight, sweetie. On the house." Her kindness felt like a shield against the hostile whispers that seemed to follow Amira everywhere she went in this city that had never quite felt like home. The elderly couple's conversation grew more urgent as they realized their situation had no easy solution. "Eleanor, we can't just leave without paying," Robert whispered. "But we genuinely forgot our wallets. We drove straight here from the doctor's appointment, remember?" Jake's voice rose with self-righteous authority. "Those old folks better not ask that terrorist girl for help. She's probably counting their money already, figuring out how to rip them off. That's what these people do. They prey on vulnerable Americans." Amira's spoon trembled slightly as the word terrorist hit her like a physical blow. 3 years of pre-med excellence, volunteer work at free clinics, and tutoring underprivileged children meant nothing when strangers looked at her hijab and saw only threat and otherness. Her soup grew cold as she struggled with the familiar decision. flee from the hostility, or stay and prove she belonged here. Eleanor approached Amira's table with the hesitant dignity of someone swallowing pride for survival. "Excuse me, dear," she said softly, her voice carrying genuine embarrassment. "I hate to bother you, but we seem to have forgotten our wallets at home. We're regular customers here, but Dolores is new and doesn't know us. Could you possibly help us with our bill? We pay you back tomorrow, I promise." The diner fell silent as every customer watched the interaction with predatory interest. Jake leaned forward, ready to intervene if his suspicions proved correct. The security guard placed his hand near his phone, prepared to call authorities at the first sign of trouble. Even Dolores paused her cleaning to witness what would happen next. Amira looked at the elderly couple, Eleanor's proud but desperate expression, Robert's quiet dignity masking obvious discomfort, and saw her own grandparents in their weathered faces. The $5 in her pocket represented 2 days of meals, her carefully calculated survival budget, the thin line between eating and starving until her next paycheck. "Of course," Amira said quietly, reaching for her wallet. "It will be my pleasure to help." The revolution would begin with soup, kindness, and a Muslim girl's choice to feed strangers who lived in a world that called her dangerous. The 5 crumpled bills felt heavier than gold as Amira placed them on the elderly couple's table. Around the diner, hostile whispers turned to shocked silence as customers witnessed the Muslim girl they'd labeled dangerous, quietly solving strangers' problems with her last money. Jake's conspiracy theories evaporated as kindness unfolded in real time. "Bless you, child," Eleanor whispered, tears forming in her eyes as she clasped Amira's hand with surprising strength. "You have no idea what this means to us." But Robert studied Amira with the intense focus of someone seeing far more than surface appearances. His business instincts, honed through 50 years of reading people's character, recognized something extraordinary in this young woman's quiet generosity. Dolores approached their table with the elderly couple's bill, $18.75 for 2 full dinners, coffee, and dessert. Amira's $5 wouldn't even cover half the cost, but she'd committed to helping without calculating the mathematics of her sacrifice. "I'll cover the difference from my tip jar," Dolores offered softly, understanding the financial reality of what she was witnessing. "That's very kind, but unnecessary," Robert said, reaching into his jacket. Instead of a wallet, he withdrew a business card holder, his movements precise and deliberate. "Young lady, before you make this generous sacrifice, I'd like you to have my card. Robert Mitchell, Mitchell Properties and Development. Please call me tomorrow morning." Jake snorted with derision from his counterstool. "Great. Now she's networking with her victims, probably planning to rob their house next." But his words carried less conviction than before, the evidence of genuine kindness, making his prejudices sound increasingly hollow and desperate. Amira studied the business card with growing confusion. Mitchell Properties was Phoenix's largest commercial real estate company, responsible for half the downtown skyline and countless shopping centers across Arizona. Robert Mitchell was a name she'd seen on billboards, charity galas, and Forbes articles about Southwest business leaders. "Sir, I think there's been some mistake," she said quietly. "No mistake," Robert replied, his voice carrying quiet authority that made even Jake pause his commentary. "Tomorrow at 9 a.m. Trust me." Eleanor squeezed her husband's hand with the knowing smile of someone who'd witnessed his business instincts prove correct countless times over 5 decades of marriage. Amira paid the full $18.75 with her $5 plus $13 from Dolores's tip jar, money the waitress had earned serving coffee and kindness to late-night Phoenix. The transaction left Amira with exactly $0, no groceries, no emergency funds, and 2 days until her campus job provided the next lifeline. "I'll pay you back," Amira promised Dolores, though both women understood the mathematical impossibility of that commitment. Student loans, family medical bills, and survival costs had created a financial prison that trapped even the most hardworking students in cycles of perpetual shortage. The bus ride home to her studio apartment took 47 minutes through Phoenix neighborhoods where streetlights flickered intermittently and safety felt negotiable after midnight. Amira counted her remaining assets, 63 cents in loose change, half a loaf of bread, generic peanut butter, and the business card that felt surreal in her exhausted hands. Her apartment building, a converted motel from the 1960s, housed mostly struggling students, undocumented families, and elderly people surviving on Social Security payments. The thin walls carried conversations in Spanish, Arabic, Somali, and desperate English, as dozens of American dreams played out in 400-square-foot spaces that cost everything residents could afford. Amira, Abibti, her upstairs neighbor Mrs. Farah called through the wall. "Are you eating enough? I have extra rice tonight." The 70-year-old Syrian refugee had arrived 3 years ago with nothing but determination to reunite with her grandchildren scattered across American cities by war and bureaucracy. "I'm fine, Mrs. Farah," Amira lied gently, understanding that her neighbor's offer came from a pension that barely covered her own medication costs. The Arabic endearment, Habibti, my dear, carried the warmth of surrogate family relationships that sustained immigrant communities through impossible circumstances. Amira spread peanut butter on bread with careful precision, making tonight's meal last as long as possible while studying organic chemistry notes that would determine her MCAT scores and medical school prospects. Her phone displayed 17 missed calls from her mother in Detroit, each one representing mounting anxiety about medical bills that had transformed their family's middle-class stability into financial catastrophe. Robert Mitchell's business card lay on her textbook like a lottery ticket, promising possibilities that seemed too extraordinary to believe. Phoenix's most successful businessman didn't give personal cards to broke Muslim students in late-night diners. The evening's events felt like hallucination born from hunger and exhaustion. At 11:47 p.m., her landlord's text arrived with perfect timing. Rent 3 days late. Pay by Friday or eviction notice Monday. The message glowed on her cracked phone screen like a digital eviction notice, another reminder that kindness toward strangers had consequences she couldn't afford. Amira fell asleep clutching Robert Mitchell's business card, wondering if tomorrow's phone call would provide miracle or disappointment. Outside her window, Phoenix's desert night whispered promises that seemed too beautiful and dangerous to trust. 26 floors above the city, Robert Mitchell sat in his penthouse office reviewing security footage from Danny's family diner. His private investigation into local charity recipients had led him to witness something remarkable: genuine kindness from someone who had nothing to give. The revolution would continue with a phone call that would change everything. The knock on Amira's apartment door came at exactly 9 a.m., interrupting her morning prayers and the desperate mathematics of surviving until Thursday's paycheck. Through the peephole, she saw an elderly man in an expensive suit holding a leather briefcase. Definitely not Mrs. Farah with leftover rice or the landlord demanding late rent payment. "Miss Hassan." Robert Mitchell's voice carried through the thin door with the same authority she remembered from the diner 12 hours earlier. "I believe we have an appointment." Amira's hands shook as she unlocked the 3 deadbolts that provided minimal security in a neighborhood where safety was negotiable and privacy was luxury most residents couldn't afford. The contrast was jarring. Phoenix's most successful businessman, standing in the doorway of a converted motel apartment, where ceiling stains told stories of decades' worth of leaking pipes and deferred maintenance. Robert's tailored suit probably cost more than Amira's annual rent, yet his expression carried no judgment about the obvious poverty surrounding him. "Mr. Mitchell," Amira stammered, suddenly conscious of her faded hijab and the peanut butter breakfast smell lingering in the cramped space. "I wasn't sure you were serious about meeting. This isn't exactly the kind of place where business executives usually conduct meetings." She gestured helplessly at the fold-out table that served as desk, dining room, and study space. "Miss Hassan, I've conducted business in boardrooms, country clubs, and construction sites." Robert smiled, settling comfortably on her only chair. "But I've learned that character reveals itself most clearly in places where people have nothing to prove and everything to lose. Your kindness last night, when you had every reason to protect your own survival, told me everything I needed to know." Amira's phone buzzed with another text from her landlord. "Payment overdue. Final warning before legal action." The message glowed on her cracked screen like a digital countdown timer, reminding her that kindness toward strangers had accelerated her path toward homelessness by exactly 48 hours. "Sir, I appreciate you taking time to visit," Amira said carefully, "but I'm not sure what kind of business arrangement would make sense. I'm a pre-med student working campus jobs, trying to keep my head above water financially. I don't have capital to invest or connections to offer." She gestured toward her organic chemistry textbooks and MCAT prep materials stacked precariously on every available surface. Robert opened his briefcase and withdrew a folder thick with legal documents that looked far too official for a social visit. "Miss Hassan, last night you spent your last $5, money you desperately needed for your own survival, to help two strangers who couldn't pay their dinner bill. That decision revealed something about your character that most people never demonstrate under pressure. It was just basic human decency," Amira protested, uncomfortable with praise for what felt like ordinary kindness. Anyone would have helped elderly people in that situation. But even as she spoke, she remembered Jake's suspicious whispers and the security guard's hostile surveillance, evidence that her assumption about universal compassion was tragically optimistic. "Actually, Miss Hassan, very few people would have made your choice," Robert replied, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd spent decades studying human behavior under pressure. "We've been conducting informal tests throughout Phoenix for 6 months, documenting how people respond when presented with opportunities to help strangers. Your reaction was extraordinary." Amira felt her world tilting as she processed Robert's words. "Tests?" she asked slowly, understanding beginning to dawn like sunrise after a very long night. "Last night wasn't coincidence. You were testing people's responses to requests for help. Eleanor and I visit different restaurants, different neighborhoods, different demographic areas," Robert explained, his businessman's precision evident in how he'd systematized charity assessment. "We observe how people react when presented with opportunities to demonstrate kindness versus self-preservation. Most people find excuses, express suspicion, or simply ignore requests for help." The apartment felt smaller as Amira realized her spontaneous kindness had actually been evaluated performance art. "So you weren't really broke? Your forgotten wallet story was deliberately constructed to see how I'd respond." Her voice carried hurt and confusion about having her generosity manipulated for research purposes. "The wallet story was fiction," Robert acknowledged, "but our need to understand human character is completely genuine. Miss Hassan, I'm 75 years old with a business empire worth approximately $800 million. My wife and I have no children. We're looking for someone worthy of inheriting our life's work and continuing our philanthropic mission." Amira's organic chemistry textbook slipped from her lap as she processed numbers that seemed too large for real conversation. $800 million. Inheritance. Philanthropic mission. The words felt like dialogue from movies rather than conversation happening in her poverty-stricken apartment, overlooking Phoenix's most dangerous intersection. "Sir, I think there's been some mistake," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the traffic noise filtering through walls that provided minimal insulation from external chaos. "I'm just a struggling student trying to survive until medical school. I'm not qualified to inherit business empires or manage philanthropic foundations." Robert smiled with the satisfaction of someone whose instincts about character had been validated by 6 months of careful observation. "Miss Hassan, qualification isn't about business degrees or family connections. It's about character revealed under pressure. Last night, when you had every reason to protect your own survival, you chose kindness toward strangers. That decision told me everything I needed to know about your worthiness." He opened the legal folder and withdrew documents that would change everything. "I'm offering you full-ride medical school scholarship, living expenses, and a position managing our charitable foundation's healthcare initiatives. Upon graduation, you'll inherit Mitchell Properties and continue our mission of helping Phoenix's most vulnerable communities." The revolution was about to become permanent, documented in legal papers that would transform poverty into power and kindness into legacy. The legal documents spread across Amira's fold-out table transformed her cramped apartment into an impromptu law office where impossible dreams were being negotiated in precise legal language. Her hands trembled as she read scholarship agreements, living stipend contracts, and inheritance clauses that would eliminate poverty permanently while elevating her into Phoenix's philanthropic elite. "Mr. Mitchell, this is overwhelming," Amira whispered, staring at numbers that represented more money than her family had earned in 3 generations. medical school tuition, living expenses, healthcare foundation management. These opportunities are usually reserved for people with connections, wealthy families, political influence. I'm just a broke Muslim student from Detroit. Miss Hassan. Eleanor spoke for the first time since entering the apartment, her voice carrying the warmth of someone who'd found the daughter they'd never had. You're exactly the kind of person this foundation was created to support. Your background isn't disqualification. It's precisely why Robert, and I know you'll use these resources to help communities that others ignore. Robert consulted his watch, the same Rolex that had caught Diner lighting 12 hours earlier during their orchestrated test of human character. The scholarship documents require your signature today to meet medical school application deadlines. The foundation position begins immediately, with your first assignment being assessment of healthcare needs in Phoenix's immigrant communities. Amira's phone buzzed with another landlord threat. Eviction papers filed. Sheriff arrives Monday. The cruel irony wasn't lost. Receiving inheritance worth hundreds of millions while facing homelessness in 72 hours. Sir, even if I sign these documents today, my rent crisis can't wait for legal processing. I'll be evicted before any of this financial assistance becomes available. Already handled, Robert smiled, withdrawing his checkbook with business executive efficiency. Your landlord received payment for 12 months' rent this morning, along with security deposits for any maintenance issues. Your immediate financial emergency has been resolved permanently. He handed her a receipt showing $15,600 paid to Phoenix Manor Apartments. The transformation felt surreal, from desperate poverty to millionaire inheritance in less than 24 hours, triggered by $5 spent on strangers' dinner in a prejudice-filled diner. Amira stared at documents that would reshape not just her personal future, but her ability to impact thousands of lives through healthcare philanthropy. There's one condition, Robert said, his voice carrying the seriousness of someone who'd spent decades building institutions designed to outlast individual lifetimes. You must complete medical school with distinction, spend 2 years working in underserved communities, and commit to managing our foundation's healthcare initiatives for minimum 10 years before inheritance becomes final. That's not a condition, Amira replied, tears streaming down her face as she realized kindness toward elderly strangers had unlocked opportunities beyond imagination. That's the life I've always wanted to live, serving communities that others abandon, providing healthcare to people who can't afford treatment, proving that Muslim Americans contribute healing rather than harm. Eleanor clasped Amira's hands with grandmotherly affection. Child, we've been watching you for months through our charity assessment program. Your volunteer work at free clinics, tutoring underprivileged students, caring for elderly neighbors despite your own poverty. These actions reveal character that most people never develop regardless of their advantages. The signature process took 47 minutes as Amira read every clause, understanding that she was accepting responsibility for continuing philanthropic work that would impact generations of Phoenix residents. The Mitchell Foundation's healthcare initiatives would expand under her leadership, providing medical services to immigrant communities who face discrimination in traditional healthcare systems. One final surprise, Robert announced, withdrawing his phone to show bank account screenshots. Your mother's medical bills in Detroit, totaling $127,000, were paid in full this morning. She received confirmation that her cancer treatment will continue without financial stress. The gesture broke Amira's remaining composure as she sobbed with relief about burdens lifted from her family. As Robert and Eleanor prepared to leave, the apartment that had felt cramped and desperate now seemed like the launching pad for institutional change. Amira Hassan, who'd spent her last $5 helping strangers, would soon manage healthcare resources that could transform Phoenix's most vulnerable communities. Miss Hassan, Robert paused at the doorway, his expression carrying satisfaction of someone whose life's work had found worthy continuation. Tomorrow you begin orientation at Mitchell Foundation headquarters. Your first project involves establishing free clinics in neighborhoods where Muslim families face healthcare discrimination. The revolution was becoming permanent, documented in legal agreements that would transform one Muslim girl's kindness into community healing that would last generations. Justice had perfect timing, arriving exactly when it was needed most. 2 years later, Dr. Amira Hassan stood in the gleaming lobby of the Hassan Free Clinic, the largest charitable healthcare facility in Phoenix's history. The bronze plaque by the entrance read, "Dedicated to proving that kindness multiplies when given freely." Words that had guided her transformation from broke student to healthcare philanthropist managing $800 million in charitable resources. The morning news played on lobby televisions as patients from dozens of countries waited for free medical treatment that would have bankrupted them at traditional hospitals. Dr. Hassan's revolutionary healthcare model has eliminated medical debt for over 50,000 Phoenix families, the reporter announced, proving that one person's generosity can reshape entire communities. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, Amira watched construction crews building the 6th Hassan Free Clinic location, this one specifically designed to serve refugee families who face discrimination in mainstream healthcare systems. Her medical degree, earned with highest honors at Johns Hopkins, had been merely the beginning of Robert Mitchell's vision becoming reality. Dr. Hassan, her assistant, interrupted the morning planning session. "There's someone here to see you. Says it's about Danny's family diner." Amira's pulse quickened as memories of that transformative night flooded back. The last $5, the hostile whispers, the elderly couple who'd changed everything with an orchestrated test of human character. Jake Morrison shuffled into her office, the same truck driver who'd called her terrorist that night 24 months ago. His weathered face carried shame and desperate hope as he approached the woman whose kindness he'd mocked with cruel prejudice. "Dr. Hassan, I don't know if you remember me, but I was in Danny's diner the night you helped those elderly folks." "I remember," Amira replied gently, gesturing toward the comfortable chairs where she counseled patients about healthcare options. "You thought I was dangerous because of my hijab. You warned others not to trust me with their money." Her voice carried no anger, only the patience she'd learned from treating thousands of patients who'd initially feared her faith. "My daughter was diagnosed with leukemia last month," Jake continued, tears streaming down his face. "Insurance won't cover experimental treatments. We're facing bankruptcy, losing our house, losing everything. When I heard about your free clinics, about how you help people regardless of their ability to pay, I realized." His voice broke completely. "You realized that the terrorist you warned people about might be the only person willing to save your daughter's life." Amira finished quietly, understanding dawning in both their expressions. The prejudice that had seemed permanent 24 months ago was dissolving under the weight of desperate need and unexpected mercy. "Your daughter will receive the best possible treatment," Amira announced, already composing treatment plans in her mind. "Experimental therapies, transportation costs, family support services, everything covered by the foundation." She handed Jake a patient care coordinator's card. "Schedule starts tomorrow morning." The transformation was complete. The man who'd seen threat now witnessed healing. The woman he'd feared became his family's salvation. Jake sobbed with gratitude as he realized that kindness multiplied rather than diminished when given freely to former enemies. Eleanor Mitchell, now 84 and serving as the Foundation's advisory board chair, watched the interaction from the doorway with the satisfaction of someone whose character assessment had proven perfect. "Robert would be so proud," she whispered, referring to her husband who'd passed peacefully 6 months earlier, knowing his life's work was in worthy hands. That evening, Amira returned to Danny's family diner for the first time since that transformative night. Dolores, now manager thanks to a foundation loan program, served coffee and stories about customers whose medical bills had been eliminated by Dr. Hassan's revolutionary healthcare model. "You know," Dolores smiled, refilling Amira's cup, "people still talk about that night when you spent your last $5 helping strangers. They say it's when Phoenix learned that kindness pays better dividends than fear." The same booth where prejudice had whispered threats now hosted community meetings about healthcare access and immigrant rights. Amira's phone displayed messages from medical school students receiving Hassan Foundation scholarships, refugee families accessing free treatment, and former critics now volunteering at clinic fundraising events. The $5 spent on strangers' dinner had multiplied into millions of dollars healing communities that others had abandoned. As she prepared for evening prayers, Amira reflected on Robert's final words before his passing. "You prove that character revealed under pressure predicts character expressed under power. The foundation will flourish because you understand that wealth is responsibility, not privilege. The Hassan free clinic system now operated in 12 cities, providing healthcare to Muslim families who face discrimination, refugee communities navigating complex systems, and anyone whose medical needs exceeded their financial resources. Amira's kindness toward two strangers had become institutional healing that would last generations. Outside Danny's diner, the same parking lot where Jake had whispered prejudices now hosted monthly community health fairs where former critics volunteered alongside Muslim medical students, proving that understanding could replace fear when people worked together toward common goals. The revolution was permanent, documented in thousands of medical records, showing lives saved, families preserved, and communities healed by one Muslim girl's decision to feed strangers who called her dangerous. Justice had perfect timing, arriving exactly when Phoenix needed healing most. What kindness will you show to strangers today? Share your stories below. Subscribe if you believe compassion multiplies when given freely. The next Dr. Hassan might be reading your comment. Will you be the reason someone's life changes forever? The transformation was complete. The real work would never end.